A pleasant day to you, Mom. I am Marian Mae Galab from BSHM2B, and today I am going to discuss the Business Organization and Management, Chapter 6 Organization for Finance. But before I am going to start my presentation, allow me to read my objectives for this presentation. Objectives. First, we will be able to differentiate and compare the various methods which a single proprietorship, a partnership, and a corporation may use or raise a capital. Second, we will be able to give the different functions of banks. Third, explain the different kinds of credit, the different sources of credit formation, and how this may be used in the Philippines. And lastly, to explain fully the differences between stocks and bonds, the reason why one and not the other issued, and how their issue is regulated. And now that I have finished discussing my objectives, let's discuss next the introduction. The introduction, inasmuch as the primary purpose of a business enterprise is to make profits, the handling of the firm's finances is therefore extremely important. Money is needed to start the business. It is needed when the business is in operation and is needed when the business is expanding. So when you start managing your finances, you will have a better perspective of where and how you are spending your money. Money is the lifeblood of the business, and a business needs to generate enough cash from its activities so that it can meet the expenses and have enough left over to repay investors and grow the business. Next, what is finance in organization? A crucial role of financial management is the planning of financial activities and resources in the organization. To this end, they use available data to understand the needs and priorities of the establishment as well as the overall economic situation and make plans and budgets for the same. This is an important task that helps maintain financial stability by balancing outflow and inflow of cash. So a vital role of financial manager is to look what resources a firm requires for a particular period. So planning helps to convince those who lend money that a company is capable of managing funds well and will use it judiciously. So it allows companies to tide over the uncertainties as there will be enough funds allocated for that purpose, both short-term and long-term purposes. Next, the capital pool or savings and investment and financing the non-corporate enterprise. So savings is generated directly and indirectly by individuals. So business enterprises, a variety of institutions, governments, and others, these savings flow into the capital pool or market through many channels. So financing the corporate enterprise. In the case of the single proprietorship and partnership, the initial capital comes from the individuals directly interested and possibly through the loans and investment that friends are willing to make in the business. So in addition to cash, these individuals may contribute the actual land, buildings, machinery, and materials needed to make up the productive capital of the business. Next is the initial corporate financing and financing day-to-day operations. So in the initial corporate financing, it is the corporate enterprise that is most concerned with the problem of capitalization. So commonly employed in the corporate financing are the corporate securities such as stocks and bonds, while the financing day-to-day operation, once a business is started, The money requirements of the company are continuous for goods, wages, and other expenditures of a going concern. So everything a business does result in coming in or going out and in property being bought or sold. Next is the cash position and financing seasonal businesses. So in cash position, there should be enough money available to pay every obligation when it is due. Such money, except for initial capital and subsequent expansion, should come from cash sales from collection of amounts receivable. So in other words, a stable cash position is one that allows a company or other entity to cover its current liabilities with a combination of cash and liquid assets. However, when a company has a large cash position above and beyond its current liabilities, it is a power signal of financial strength. So next is the financing seasonal businesses. So quite a number of businesses are seasonal in nature. So this is a business which has a lively demand during hot season and little if any in the cold months. So the significance of seasonal business to the company treasurer is that during the dull season, the company may not be producing enough business to bring much money. Next is the different functions of banks. So banks have two functions as they act as middlemen between savers and investors. So that is between the supply demand for capital and they supply the principal means of payment in a modern communities or the bank credit. If the banking system is working properly, the middleman function should bring about continuous equilibrium between the volume of savings and the volume of investments. First is the short-term financing. Traditionally, it is used for seasonal purpose. For example, to build an inventory. But a short-term financing means that taking out a loan to make a purchase, usually with a loan term of less than 1 year. So short-term funding can help ensure you have enough finances to meet all the costs and set up your company with a stable financial foundation. So in the short-term financing, we have the trade credit, which means it is a loan extended by one trader to another when the goods and services are bought on credit. Second is the secured borrowing. It means a loan in which the borrower pledges some assets of collateral for the loan. For examples, our property, vehicles, and cash. Next is the unsecured borrowing. It is also called a personal loan. For example, you borrow money from a bank or other lenders and agree to make a regular payments until the loan is repaid in full. And lastly is the paper and notes. Under the paper and notes, we have the acceptance financing and the commercial financing. And lastly is the captive financing. Second is the intermediate term financing. Intermediate term financing depends on a large measure upon predictions of the business climate, company operation, and cash flow. The extent to which lenders have confidence in the managerial control and forecasting abilities of the borrowers is therefore crucial. So under the intermediate term financing is the leasing. So one of the more popular methods of obtaining intermediate financing or long-term financing involves the use of leases. So leasing is an illegal binding contract outlining the terms under which one party agrees to rent property owned by another party. Third is the long-term financing. So the longest term financing is with equity, which occurs when investors turn over cash in return for a part of ownership in the company. So in other words, long-term financing is defined as any financial instrument with maturity exceeding 1 year. Next is under the long-term financing are the debentures, which means by far the largest volume of long-term funds is made available to companies in the form of long-term loans, either secured and unsecured. The next is the bonds, which will be we will be tackling the bonds in the next few slides. And for our fourth and fifth, the government financing and the off-bank financing. So the government financing can take the form of direct governmental involvement, or there can be government programs to facilitate borrowings in other ways, such as by providing government subsidized or supervised insurance programs. So in other words, the government financing is about the revenue and expenditure decisions of the local government. So it covers the sources of revenue that are used by local governments such as taxes, user fees, and intergovernmental transfers. Fifth is the off-bank financing, refers to the financing which does not appear on a balance sheet. So an off-bank financing or the off-balance financing is an accounting practice where companies keep certain assets and liabilities from being reported on balance sheet. So for example, the operating leases and partnership. Next is the paying for good purchased and estimating cash requirements. Paying for good purchased is when the company buys goods from others. It receives a bill or invoice for the goods purchased. While the estimating cash requirement, there are ready known factors of expense which help determine the cash requirements. So these requirements may be first for employee payroll, second is for utility service, third is for the current purchases, and lastly, the non-routine expenditures. So the company's commitment and budget. The company's commitment, as commitments are made, they are entered on a commitment sheet, so which shows to the treasurer at all times how much money is to be paid out and when. While the budget is a well-managed business are operated under a budget plan by which an estimate expected income and expenditure of the company is drawn up and detailed, showing where the money is coming from and where it will go. Now let's proceed to the insurance protection. Insurance protection is an adequate insurance on the properties of the company is another responsibility of the treasurer. So the insurance protection is not incidental to the operation of a business. It may be fatal. So insurance protection, in other words, it helps the company recover from financial losses as a result of incidents. So for example, the damage of a property. So rather, it is a plan and guide for carrying out a plan. So the purposes of budgets of insurance protection first, the planning. Planning mitigates the risk that an organization financial results will be worse than expected. Second is the control. It is to manage the income and the expenditure. And lastly is the coordination. Coordination is to obtain and organize the needed personnel, equipment, and materials to carry out the business. Moving on from The insurance protection, let us continue to pay taxes when due. The payment of taxes due on the company's property should not escape the attention of the treasurer. At a stated time each year, the company is billed for local taxes on its property. Bills for collection may be lost in the mails or missent, and the non-receipt of a bill is no excuse for not paying. In carrying insurance for the company's properties, the following considerations should be taken. First, comes a survey of the risk that the company faces. Second, a survey of the possibility of reducing this risk by decreasing the fire or accidents hazard. Third, comes the analysis of the insurance available. Fourth, the procuring policies that cover the risk against which protection is desired. And lastly, the renewal of insurance policies before their expirations leaves the company unprotected. Next is the uses of credit information in the Philippines. So our financial system now operates on the basis of huge amount of information concerning large and medium scale business units, governmental units, domestic and foreign, and many other institutions that are actual or potential participants in financial markets. So the basic data came from many sources, published balance sheets and profits and loss statements, reports to the Securities and Exchange Commission or the SEC, and other regulatory government agencies reports to stock exchanges, special investigations, and so on. Moving on, let's have the information sources on financing opportunities. So first, the short-term borrowing. Most important source and possibly on loans for up to 10 years is the company's bankers. Second is the useful, up-to-date information on the long-term borrowing may be obtained from the corporate finance department of any money center, bank, or from similar department in the office of a major or regional broker. Third, advice on the placement of equity is available from members of the underwriting fraternity. And fourth, in the area of background reading, excellent practical and occasional papers are disseminated by leading banks and underwriters. And lastly, to explain fully the differences between stocks and bonds, the reason why one and not the other is issued, and how their issue is regulated. Next is the bonds. Bonds are evidence of debt, stock are evidence of ownership. That is a basic distinction. Thus, bonds have a specified maturity date on which issuer is legally obliged to pay the principal amount to the bondholder. If the issuer fails to do so, the contract is violated and the bondholder may take steps legally to compel payment. So in other words, bond is a fixed income instrument that represents a loan made by an investor to a borrower. So bonds are used by the companies, municipalities, and states. It also contained promise to pay stipulated amounts of interest periodically to bondholders, but the provision of stock issues never include an outright promise to make dividends payment to the stockholders. For the stockholders, on the other hand, the right to vote for directors and on a certain major questions of corporate policy is an inherent right of ownership. So the sale of odd additional stock may jeopardize the control of corporation, and this may cause the corporate officials to seek funds elsewhere. So bonds have a special advantage over stock for financing an investment project, which promises to be a temporary one, to be followed by a contraction in total investment of the firm. In this situation, equity or stock financing would leave a permanently expanded number of shareholders. So the SEC requires a full disclosure of all the pertinent facts about any company before it makes a public offering of a new stock or bonds. So the company must file a lengthy registration with the SEC in which it sets forth the data about its financial condition, its assets and liabilities, and what it owns and what it owes. The SEC also seeks that the information which is filed with is available to any possible buyers of the new issue. So a company is required to put all the essential facts onto a printed prospectus, and every security dealer who offers the new stock or sale must give a copy of that prospectus not only to who buys the new issue but to everyone from whom he even solicits order. In short, the SEC imposition of full disclosure procedures on issuing companies has undoubtedly done much to protect the investors against possible frauds. So the summary of my presentation is that the function of finance in organization is essentially concerned with the management of monetary affairs with the raising of expending of money. So the financial officer may be called vice president for finance or treasurer or controller depending on the practice of the corporation. So these chief financial officers handles cash, bank relations, credit, and accounting functions. Remember also that banks have two functions. So they act as the middle between savers and investors. That is between the supply and demand for capital, and they supply the principal means of payment in modern communities, the bank credit. Next to remember are the three types of financing: the short term, intermediate, and long term financing. Next is the SEC that requires a full disclosure of all the pertinent facts about any company before it makes a public offering of new stock or bonds. So the company must file a lengthy registration with the SEC in which it sets forth the data about the financial condition, its assets and liabilities, what it owns and what it owes. So before I am going to end my presentation today, always remember that knowledge is power. You hear it all the time, but knowledge is not power. It's only a potential power. It only becomes a power when we apply it and use it. Somebody who reads a book and doesn't apply it, there are no advantage over someone who is illiterate. None of it works unless you work. We have to do our part. If knowing is half the battle, action is the second half of the battle, according to Jim Quick. So that's it for today. I hope that you learned something from what I have discussed. So thank you for listening, Mom. Once again, I am Marian Mae Galab from BSHM 2B. Have a nice day ahead. Goodbye.